After the 2018 Grand Final, a mate turned to me and said, "Luke, I think that was our best chance of a premiership, and it will be for the next couple of years." And I went, "Dude, are you kidding? We've got a great team, great game plan," and boy was I wrong. Roll the intro. Richmond will win by 30 points. Cox will find his form like he always does against Richmond and kick 4 goals. So I was pretty close with my prediction. Unfortunately, I said the Tigers by 30, they won by 32. My big call didn't pan out, but so it is, eh? So we scored the first goal and we actually looked like we were ready to fight. Chua with a nice snap out of the pack. It was great to see. The boys looked like they were up and about. Yes, our skills were a little bit how's it going, but that came down to a lot of the rain. But then Richmond scored the next 9 uncontested goals and she was all over before she could even speak. We were kept to 1 goal pretty much for the whole half, except for the last couple of minutes where Pendles kicked one and then Crocker kicked another after the siren. But just as I alluded to, she was pretty much all over at half time and we spent the second half trying to claw ourselves out of that pit of despair. The Tigers were able to get the lead up to over 50 points. I think it was about 59 points before we started kicking a couple goals. The Tigers knew they had it won, so they took it a little bit easier on us, thankfully, so it wasn't a mauling, and we lost by 32 points. It was the same thing as last week. Whenever we kicked a couple or we looked like to have a little bit of momentum, Richmond would get one, a quick one over the top, or it would be in our 50 for a long time, and then, 2 kicks, they transition to the forward line, and Lynch kicks one of his 5 goals. So, as it's been for the last 4 out of 5 weeks, there isn't much to like. You couldn't look at that game and go, okay, but this area was cool, but this area did well. I have picked a couple of players that I do think performed as well as they could given the circumstances. Jordan De Goey really gives his all. Yesterday was another really good one for him in his repertoire. Okay, he didn't score a lot of goals, he only kicked 1. But with Adams going down before the game, he was thrown into the midfield and was playing more of that midfield role that Adams would have played. Collected 28 disposals, had 11 inside 50s, 6 clearances, so he did his job as a midfielder. Every week, he puts his body on the line, whether it's making a contest in the forward line or getting that hard ball in the middle, but without anyone helping him, I don't see how he can carry this team week in, week out. Will Hoskin-Elliott down back is a weird thing to see, but I kind of dig it. He takes a good mark, much like Howe, and he's very smart with the ball in his hand. He makes good decisions coming out of that back line. What putting Will Hoskin-Elliott down in the back does, it allows Crisp to get into the midfield, because Crisp has been one of our better midfielders these last couple of weeks, and it opens it up a little bit in the forward line. Yes, ideally, you want to see Hoskin-Elliott taking those marks in the forward line and kicking for goal, but just like Howe when he moved to Collingwood, if there's a job to be done down back, you have to do that job. One of our unsung players this season has been Chris Mayne. Yesterday, he had another good game. He controlled that back line as much as he could, especially with Ruffy going down. It was tough circumstances. Lynch, Rewalt, we know how the Tigers set up in that forward line. So the ball was down there quite a lot, but a cooler, older head did prevail, and he took 10 intercept possessions while getting 30 of his own, going at 80% disposal efficiency, and he rebounded from 50 7 times, which gives us that transition to go into our forward line and attack. Deja vu. This game in particular and the last couple of weeks have shades of 2017. I sat there watching it and I was like, this is what I felt like, 2016, 2017, where we were absolutely crap and just there was no game plan. None of the guys were working for each other. And that showed through yesterday. Most of the time yesterday, we looked less than mediocre, and you could count on one hand how many players actually stood up and played side by side, like our motto says. Kicking in hope. Last week I said that we need to be smarter going into 50 and kicking that ball into a leading target as opposed to going long and going high. Long bombs just don't work. If Cox isn't being manhandled long enough to take a mark, he just can't take a mark in general at the moment. Richmond's defenders, much like all the defenders that we've versed in the last couple of weeks with this high ball, have been there at the drop of the ball and are quick on the transition, quick with the pressure, and we just get hit with that counter attack. We also did this a lot around the ground. I know in my last video I said that instead of that handball to a player that's 2 metres away from you and under immense pressure, kick it long in the hopes of a 50-50 or it trickling out of the boundary line. What we were doing yesterday was kicking it out of the defence in hope, but we weren't kicking it towards a boundary where it's a little bit more difficult to counter-attack because you're on those sides. We were kicking it right down the middle, right down the guts. Richmond take the mark and they come right back, and it just goes over the top of all of our defenders' heads. Another stat that I want to bring up just quickly is that we had no running bounces yesterday. What that means is that no one was willing to take the game on, or there was not enough time, not enough pressure, not enough shepherding for us to get a bit of a run on the ball. Our forward line is a shambles at the moment. We went into yesterday's game with more small forwards than you could poke your stick at. In theory, going small in the wet is practical. The ball spills out of the contest and your small forwards are there to clean it up. But our forwards didn't have the chance of doing any of that. The pressure coming from Richmond was incredible, and that chaotic high and long ball from us didn't help anyone. One of the issues I have, and probably many of the other supporters have in regards to our forward line, is the conundrum of Cox. You can't drop him for form in the VFL because there's no one to bring up. But what you have to do, in my opinion, sit him one out in the goal square, only leading 15, 20 metres out of that goal square, but then pushing back in. What it does is it takes one of their good defenders out of the game, and it creates that leading target as opposed to a high ball coming in or Cox pushing more up the ground, getting that ball outside of the 50 when he should be that leading target and that big guy trying to catch those balls. What he also needs to do is he needs to get a bit of a mongrel about him. Too many times he's pushed off the ball way too easily, maybe looking for that free kick, but he won't do any of the pushing back. Obviously, it doesn't help when he gets manhandled 9 times out of 10, but of course the boys in fluoro just turn a blind eye to that. We have the first or second most dominant ruckman in the AFL at the moment at our disposal. Yesterday, we dominated the hitouts 42-21, literally doubling what the Tigers were providing. Grundy went up against Soldo and Chol, a 1-2 like the Giants did and like West Coast did and like we don't really do. But in saying that we won those hitouts, we lost the centre clearances 7-15. Yes, we did win the stoppage clearances around the ground, but those centre clearances is where you really start your attack on the ball. It just seems to me that our midfielders and Grundy aren't working together. Maybe it's got to do with the ruck coach, or maybe there's just no communication out in the ground. You'd think that by now Treloar, DeGoey, Pendles, Crisp, whoever goes in the middle knows exactly how Grundy plays and where the taps are going to go, but it just feels like that they're all clueless. Like I said in my last video, Richmond were bound to rove to Grundy's taps, and that's exactly what they did and how they won the majority of their clearances. Before the ball was even bounced, we lost Adams to a hamstring injury. It does only look precautionary, and fingers crossed he comes back next week. You'd think that he would be replaced by another midfielder, but he was replaced on the side by another small forward in Ben Crocker. During the game, we also lost Roughhead to concussion. Not much you can do about that. That's just an unfortunate consequence of what happens when you get hit in the head with a ball. Look, I don't want to be one for blaming injuries, but they do suck. We've lost a lot of big names at the wrong time in our season. But in saying that, this time last year, we were without Moore, Elliott, Wells, Scharenberg, Treloar, Dunn, Wells, and Aish. Some of those same guys at the moment are injured. And yes, injuries do take their toll, but last year we made the grand final, and this year would be lucky to push for a top 6 spot. A good team with a good game plan doesn't care what players go in and out of the team, because they have the confidence that if a player goes out and a player comes in, they know what the game plan is, they know how the structure is, and they know how to execute it all. 1 vote, Chris Mayne. Like I said, tried all day and was one of our rocks down back. 2 votes, Pendles. Scored 2 goals when we needed him. Had 5 clearances. Bunch of disposals, and all this with a broken finger. 3 votes, DeGoey. He played everywhere. Midfield, forward line, and he gathered some possessions in the back line. He just goes and goes and goes, exactly like the Energizer Bunny. But like I said, I don't know how he can carry this team for the rest of the season. It's hard to look forward after the last couple of weeks, but we do play the Suns next Sunday at the MCG. This game and the game after that, the Melbourne game, will look to rectify our season, maybe push for a top 4 spot, and by top 4 I mean 4th spot, but I think best case for us at the moment would be 5th. But if we put up what we did yesterday and the week before that, this Suns game is going to be a lot closer than everyone thinks it will be. Also in the next few weeks, we hope to get a handful of players back. It's tough being a Collingwood supporter at the moment. I know we're not in a super bad position. We are only 5th or 6th on the ladder, but losing 4 of your last 5 games is ridiculous. Remember that after that Saints game, we were 7 wins and 2 losses. And then everything came crumbling down. I hate questioning whether or not the players have the will and the desire, but it just looks like they're hanging their heads at the moment. I'm just making really bold assumptions, but it just seems like there's something within the club that is, I don't want to say rotting, but for lack of a better term, rotting this team. I do feel like it started with that Steve-O gambling thing, but that's another video for another time. So this has been my review of the Richmond clash on Friday night. Thank you for watching. Let me know your thoughts, how you think we can improve, what you think we have to do from here. And as always, like, comment, subscribe, tell your family, tell your friends, tell your pets, and until next time, I'll swoop you later. But just as to a play. And that's the way the cookie crumbles.